Hi, I'm Dr. Christopher Stokes. I'm currently Library Liaison Officer for Penryn Humanities, and this is the second half of a video tutorial. In the first half, I had a look at the catalogue and ELE. Now I'm going to look at online databases and e-resources, and I have a confession to make, which is that this will be tilted rather towards the literature side, simply because that's what I know. But some of these resources, and certainly the principles behind exploring our databases, are very applicable to history students as well. Right. There's lots of different ways of getting to the A to Z of our online resources, but one of the easiest is simply from the page we're already familiar with, encore.exeter.ac.uk. If you go down to the bottom right here, library links, databases, and that opens up a list of all online resources across all subjects. You can see stuff in medicine and science and German and film across here, and all of this, for what it's worth, is open to you, but probably you're going to want to limit things by selecting your subject. So for example, literature. Now I just want to highlight a few resources that will be of use primarily, as I say, to lit students, but some of these will also be relevant to historians as well. The first is the OED, which, as you might imagine, is under O. Here we go, Oxford English Dictionary Online. As with all of these, you may be prompted to sign in, but if you've signed in somewhere else on the way, you should get straight through. It's a dictionary, unsurprisingly, but it's so much more than a dictionary. Let's type in a random word here, communication, click go. Now there will be definitions of communication, but there will be a lot more. One interesting thing is a really authoritative and effusive, extensive account of its etymology, that is the origin of the word. This can be very interesting in unpicking language. Also very important is the main difference between the OED and normal dictionaries. It is a description, an archive of all the different meanings of words across history from the very earliest. So the very earliest usages of the word communication are actually not what we might expect. They are to do with affinity or association. So in 1382, Wycliffe from the Bible is the very earliest, 1425. What fellowship is light to darkness? What communication of Christ, Jesus Christ, to Belial, the satanic or the devil? And what the Wycliffe means here in this text that the OED is cited, what affinity is there? Now, of course, if we look through, there is early usage of the more familiar meaning of the word communication to do with interpersonal contact, but this is great because you're going to be studying so many historical texts, and the resonances of individual words do change even within 50 years or 100 years, let alone centuries. So use the OED to track the changing meanings of words. Now, that's the first one. The second one, handily enough, is right next to the OED, and it's the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. Now, I'm being prompted to log into this one. There we go. This is, as it suggests, biographies, and just use this as a really superior substitute to Wikipedia. Don't use Wikipedia. If you want to find out something about a writer or indeed any historical figure, I'm choosing Christina Rossetti at random here. There she is. Come here. This gives you usually quite accessible, quite short biographies that will tell you lots of things you might want to know about Rossetti, her family background, her class, what happened across her life, when did she write what was her religious and political sort of positions. It's all there, and it also allows you to click through to, for example, her family. Here we go, there's Dante Gabriele Rossetti, her brother, and he's got a potted biography too. So use this far infinitely superior to something like Wikipedia or other Google searches. This is scholarly biographies, the facts contained within the Oxford DNB, Dictionary of National Biography. You can rely on them. Now I want to sort of spread out to describe types of resources, but I will give you particular examples. The first is online archives. Now there's quite a few different types of this one. There's one called Echo, which is about the 18th century. There's one called EBO, which is of the Renaissance. And what these are fully searchable, full-text archives of texts from a certain era or certain types of text from a certain era. So if you look at Echo, for example, you can actually fully search the entirety of the textual universe of the 18th century. We'll click in just to have a little look. It may take a little while to load up. Here it is. It's working out that I am indeed a legitimate person here. 180,000 titles from 1700 to 1800, 33 million pages of text, and we can search it all. So let's say we are interested in consumption, the disease, now known as TB. We'll click that. You can sort by author, but far more interesting, of course, is relevance. Here we go. We have references to consumption. Well, not the medical consumption here, I think. Adam Smith, An Inquiry into the Natures and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. It's an economics text. This one by Thomas Beddoes from 1799. This is TB, so we could look at a medical document about TB. So say we're reading a poem which includes a sort of consumptive poet dying of TB. Well, we can have a look at the contemporary medical discourse surrounding consumption at the time. It's not the only type of that database, Echo. Another good example would be British periodicals. Now this has a bigger time span, but it focuses on magazines, and magazine and periodical culture was massive right up to the early 20th century, which is when this database finishes. We might want to look at the Pre-Raphaelites, which is an artistic movement that Christina Rossetti and indeed Dante Gabriel Rossetti were part of. Let's see how they pick up in magazine culture. We see mentions from 1850 all the way up to 1969. Let's say we want to concentrate on the late Victorian period. We cut down that date range. You can just play around with these databases. If you're at all digitally literate, you'll be able to manipulate the searches relatively easily. And for example, here we have an article by a post-Raphaelite on the pre-Raphaelites. Click through. May well be satirical. Could be a review, could be a serious thing. We don't know until we find it. Might take a little bit of here. Okay, it's a little satirical poem. Their art is bad, I'll tell you why, with some other bits and pieces here. So we can download this if we want as a PDF. This kind of thing, it's totally obscure. But if you find it, if you're doing an article, an academic essay on one of your modules about the Pre-Raphaelites, about Rossetti, then this kind of thing, you could bring it in and it would just make your essay look great, as long as you use it well, because you've gone into the archives and done your own research. So there's plenty of databases like Echo, like British Periodicals Online, which enable you to go into the real nitty-gritty of all kinds of texts as they exist across history. The fourth database I want to highlight to you is represented by Oxford Scholarly Editions Online. Again, it's not the only type of this database, but it's a good example. You'll notice in your reading list, we want you to go to the best editions because they've been edited by academics using really reliable, accurate texts, and they will have lots and lots of notes. And what something like Oxford Scholarly Editions Online does, because these books, even if they're in paperback, are quite expensive, it provides them all to you as ebooks. So particularly if you want to go beyond your set reading later on in your degree, or pick up a reference, a side reference, maybe one text refers to another text, something we call intertextuality, then you can use Oxford Scholarly Editions or similar databases and EResources to do that. So here we have the real top-notch scholarly editions of all of Jane Austen's letters, all of her youthful works or juvenilia, and all of her novels, and even her prayers, there we go, and her poetry. So say a letter gets referred to somewhere, you can actually go, click through and get the full letter. It might have been quoted just a sentence or two by a critic, and you might go, that's interesting, I might want to use that in my essay. I wonder what the rest of the letter was about and what that sentence was in context. Well, here you can find it. And on the right-hand side here, you have the scholarly notes provided by the editor, who will be an expert in Jane Austen. Similarly, we can have a look at something much more familiar. Oh, sorry, there we go. Not so much that one. See if we can get through to Pride and Prejudice. There we go. Pride and Prejudice, the Oxford Scholarly edition of that. Again, we have the text, the very familiar text. It is a truth universally acknowledged with notes. You'll see the notes. Oh, they actually suggest you consult the OED, as we've just discussed, to see the real changing historical usage of words. What did truth mean in Jane Austen's time? What did engage mean? And in fact, if we click through, all these databases are interconnected. We'll actually be taken to the OED engage. So that's kind of cool. So there's 4 types of resources that I've suggested: the OED, the Oxford DNB, various sort of historical archives of digital text. Remember, that's all fully searchable from anywhere. You're not just picking out the titles. Your search will pick out any usage of that word or that search string anywhere it appears, in the poems, in the novels, in the medical texts, in the periodicals. It's an immensely powerful thing. And fourthly, they're the Oxford Scholarly editions and similar sort of databases. Literature Online is another one that has a lot of primary texts, that is, text by poets, text by dramatists, text by novelists. The 5th thing I want to show you is sort of selected at random. It's just there to show there's so many things on this list of databases. We have British Library Sounds, we have Canadian poetry, we have databases about gender, about theatre, we have databases about empire, we have databases about the Bible. So it's immensely, immensely rich. Just to show you one example, this is something we've subscribed to relatively recently, London Lowlife. We're going to be, let's go back here because I know we do have access to this, regardless of what the database was telling me. Yeah, there we go, it's picked it up here. This is a database about the underbelly of the metropolis from the 18th, 19th and early 20th century London, and it's just a cornucopia of stuff. You can explore interactive maps, for example. A lot of these databases will be really visual. Let's zoom in. What do we have here? We have the River Thames. Let's follow it through past Tower of London there to the London Docklands. Let's click Victorian London. Okay, right, what's this? We have something about the Thames Tunnel, and in fact, do we have an image? No, just there we go. It's now going to load up a picture of, there we go, the Thames Tunnel. So if that got referred to in a Victorian novel, there it is. You can see it. We can move forward and have a look at street views. These are engravings. Here's one. Let's again go to just south of Tower Bridge. This is near Shad Thames, and it's almost like a sort of Google Street View, but from the Victorian period. I mean, you can just play around with these kind of things. There's thematic data, a tool. There's lots of different kinds of maps you can see made at different sort of periods, but it's just an illustration of the real wealth of stuff that's available to you. You think, when I'm doing my research, I go to the library, I have a look at physical books. It's so much more than this. Just have a play, have a browse of our immense range of resources, not just in English, but in history and in other disciplines. You never know what you might find. You might find something that utterly transforms your essay and utterly transforms the way you look at something. So as always, best of luck with your research.